A very good evening to all of you here, and we have another live episode of this what is called the Indic Mega Weekend. And today I have got R. Jagannathan, better known as the Jaggi, with me, and Savio, the Prince Arihan. What is Prince Arihan, Savio?
Well, actually, there was a time when I was meditating and I wanted to figure out a name for my Twitter ID. I normally do that when I want to start something new, and this name Arihan came up, and I looked it up, and Arihan predominantly meant somebody who fights evil with good. So in Asian mythology, there is the name Arihan. He was a warrior who fought evil with good. So that's what came to me while meditating. I never heard the name of Arihan before. So when I decided, I started to call it Prince Arihan.
So, Jaggi sir, good evening to you. How are you doing?
Fine, good. Glad to hear that finally we got the Ram Mandir going. And yesterday I think it marks a turning point. I rewrote Jawaharlal Nehru's Tryst with Destiny speech, saying that the real tryst with destiny begins today. Huh?
I read that. So that actually takes me to my first question.
Right.
That question first to Jaggi and then to Savio. Jaggi sir, do you think, it's a very short, crisp and straight question, that 5th August marks the independence from Nehruism?
Well, independence is a movement usually. It's not a specific date. Just like we didn't necessarily get freedom on 15th of August 1947 from colonial rule. So it's a process, it ended there. Like I think this is, I would say, the beginning of the end of Nehruvian ideology. It has been under challenge for the last 25 to 30 years. And this marks the first milestone that people are now willing to say that, okay, that was a failed ideal. And it went against basic civilizational ideals of this nation, which was not born in 1947. It has a 5,000-year heritage, and it is a civilizational state. And there are many more things that actually happened before we were born in 1947. So what 5th August signals is the beginning of the end of the infiltrator idea of India that got spliced into the long civilizational history that goes back nearly 5,000 years. So I would say it marks an end to a wrong kind of idea, the so-called idea of India, which I think started with Nehru and continued for a long while. Hopefully, this is the start of a new idea of Bharat that it's far more inclusive, and it is not violative of our long-term heritage. So I think the process began about 30 or 40 years ago when this whole Ram Temple agitation and other things began. And this marks the culmination of the first phase of the struggle. I think it's too early to celebrate and say that everything is all done, it's all gone, because there are lots of Nehruvians hidden in the closet. They will keep coming at periodic intervals because there is a global support system for them. So we have to take the battle to their side. And what we have done is we have built a local fort now. We now need to extend the battle to other areas so that we take the fight to their field and not battle defensively where we are at home. I think this is the first phase of the fight has ended. The second phase begins, which is a broader one.
That's very well explained, from the trenches into the fields.
Mm-hmm.
Savio, what's your take?
Well, actually, I think it's a very auspicious occasion, what happened on August 5th. I think it's got much to do than just Nehruism. I think the real intrinsic quality of Bharat, the real intrinsic nature of Bharat was lost over the years of invader ideologies being set in this country. More importantly, some of those ideologies continued even though we had independence. So with the coming of the Ram Mandir, with the establishment of what I consider to be Ram Rajya, or the journey towards the establishment of Ram Rajya, what you're really getting at is us as Indians thinking towards what has always been an intent of our forefathers in the past, of an Akhanda Bharat. And when I mean Bharat, I am not talking about the geographical locations of India. I'm talking about everyone who spiritually connects with the idea of Sanatan Dharma in India. So to me, yesterday was the laying down of the roadmap of that journey towards Ram Rajya, which was what Bharat was always recognized for. And that is a momentous occasion, because we were lost in oblivion for the last 70 odd years, and even before that, because of the invader submissive ideologies that have been inculcated into us, and that became a part of our thought process. I think that thought process is going to change, and people are going to be more working towards a Akhanda Bharat. That's my view to it.
Okay, so now let us trace this journey, or retrace this journey. Even though Nehru, as far as the chronology is concerned, is only from 1929 onwards, but this whole idea of what is called Nehruism, which is complete with things like political correctness and appeasement, and the socialistic ideas, and the failed communist ideologies, taking inspirations from them, having a wrong kind of an economic model. All these things actually they started from the Khilafat movement. And the Khilafat movement is a classic case of appeasement, where people who wanted independence from the oppressive Britons, from the British Empire, they suddenly went and supported some people who wanted an oppressive empire in far-off Turkey to continue. And not merely that, they did not even understand the meaning of Khilafat, because Khilafat is a universal phenomenon, and pan-Islamism extends to all parts of the world. So they were actually inviting the rule of the Caliph in India as well.
Yes.
The Caliphate movement started in 1919, but the Khilafat non-cooperation movement started on the 1st of August 1920, later joined by the Indian National Congress, via a resolution passed in their Calcutta CWC meeting on 7th of September. And we all along we've been taught that the non-cooperation movement was actually launched by Indian National Congress under Gandhi ji. So that is the first instance of political correctness and some kind of a chicanery that has continued to dog us after independence under this strange concept of Nehruism. That led to partition. That was a natural culmination. I think Jaggi has a lot to say about it, so I will go straight to him. Yes, sir.
See, it was the biggest possible blunder and the beginning of the Congress Party's appeasement politics. As you know, after the First World War, when the Allied powers won and the Central powers lost, and Turkey was reduced to a small thing, and all its extra territories like Syria, Iraq, Palestine were all separated under the terms of the treaty, right? But the Caliph was still there. So the British honored the thing. So this whole Khilafat movement actually started in various parts of the Muslim world. But ironically, it was strongest in the area where Indians were there. That means Indian Muslims were actually at the forefront of the Khilafat movement, when actually in most other Muslim countries it died off. It would have not died off much earlier here, except for the foolishness of the Congress, which in 1920, in a historic blunder, backed a pan-Islamic movement and linked it with the idea of our soil. So what had that got to do with that? And very soon they were proved to be completely wrong. Right in the middle of 1919, 2021, Indian Islamism was about to take off. Around the same time, about 20,000 Indian Muslims said, we are leaving India for good, because this is what do you call the land of Haram. Huh? They went to Afghanistan.
Darul
Then
Harb.
Hijrat they
Darul
call
Harb.
it. Yeah, yeah, that's right. And then into 1921, barely a year after the Khilafat Movement, you had the Mopla riots, which theoretically, according to the left historians, it was a peasant movement, but actually it turned out to be an anti-Hindu movement, and Gandhi's role in it is well known. And it was only in 1922, after the Chauri Chaura and all, when Gandhi said, I won't allow violence. So his whole business was only non-violence. He got the freedom movement, he mortgaged it to the Khilafat movement. And when Khilafat failed, freedom struggle itself got a bad name. Okay, so I think it was a completely wrong move. And repeatedly, the signs were ignored that this had nothing to do with the freedom movement. It had to do with pan-Islamism. And all these incidents happened. That Hijrat movement, the Mopla riots, everything happened during that time. Okay. And we still thought that this was the thing. And all the fellows who were in the Khilafat movement had no interest in having a united India, with the exception of Maulana Azad and that Hakim, in this thing, Hakim Sahab, Ajmal Khan, yes, correct. They were the two who stayed back here, but they were interested in a united India because they wanted to convert the whole of India into Islam rather than because they thought they were secular. So the reasons for staying were different. And the remaining guys, the two Ali brothers, the notorious guys, they said even the worst Muslim is better than the best Hindu, including Gandhi. Those are the kinds of guys we gave credence to. I mean, come on, this is, I mean, like every second day they're telling you that like it is. And you accept slaps in your face and you continue as though, I mean, with your closed eyes. I mean, that was the beginning of our disastrous, involvement with appeasement politics, which ignored all objective reality, and it has continued right till 90s, till almost the mosque came down. And even now it continues in many ways. I mean, no, it's not required, but we see the remnants of it are still there, and many politicians feel the need to pander to it. So I am saying what we are seeing is the terrible thing that began in 1920. It's hopefully dying. I hope it's the dying embers, but it's still there. There is still a battle to be fought. Appeasement needs to end. We need to be soldiers of a true and united and secular and unified country, which revels in its civilizational ethos without in any way excluding anybody. That is what we need to go ahead.
Yes, I mean, that's what Indian civilization is all about. It's talked
Yeah.
about always, even if you look at the Bhagavad Gita, there also Krishna tells us that is samam sarveshu bhuteshu tishtantam parameshwaram, that God resides in every being in the same equal measure, and every being, animate or inanimate. And
Right.
so that person has to make of what God he has within himself. He's the one. That is what the theory of karma is all about. Savio, this Khilafat movement was the direct cause of partition. That is my statement. What would you say?
Well, I would have to agree with you, Sanjay, on that. I think the Khilafat movement was one of the reasons why a section of Indians decided that they were not Indians because they belonged to a particular religion. And it is based on that religion that they decided that they needed to have a separate nation. And that seed was sown because of the Khilafat movement, a Khilafat movement that was supported by Mahatma Gandhi himself. The fact of the matter is, even today, if you go into what is happening around, with Turkey, as I had mentioned before in many of my articles and even in some talks before, Turkey is continuing to have a great impact as far as Islamic radicalism in India is concerned. Because to Turkey and to the current leader in Turkey, Erdogan, his main focus is to reinstate the Caliph movement across the globe. So Turkey, more than Saudi Arabia, because the Saudi young ruler right now, he's more liberal in his approach. So that space that he's looking at being filled is being done by the Turkey ruler. So today, the Islamic radicalizations that you are seeing in Kashmir, the Islamic radicalizations you are seeing in Kerala, is nothing but the repackaging of the Khilafat movement. What you're really seeing today, it's not dead. It just does not have the Khilafat name. The fact of the matter is that while some set of them left and formed another nation, there is another set of people who believe that Islamic radicalism of today must be enforced, and Islamic nation in India at some point of time over the next coming decades should be enforced. And that is again being driven by the Khilafat movement, which is the modern Khilafat movement, which is more dangerous than what it used to be before, because now they resort to terrorism. And that's where we are today. So if you're asking me that whether the Khilafat movement was the cause of the partition, yes. Does it exist in India anymore? Yes. The point is it continues because it's a mindset. It's a mindset that's ingrained from generation to generation to tell the people of a particular section of society that they are in danger in India because these group of people, the larger majority, are Hindus and they are against you. So this real problem, honestly, Sanjay, is this word secular in our constitution. Because according to me, it is the most prostituted word in the country at this point of time. I'm sorry to say that, but it is a fact. And you know what? 99% of the people who use the word secular do not understand the clinical definition of the word secular. The definition that we have been taught about secular has always been acceptance of all religion in matters of governance. And you ask anybody, he'll say it's about accepting all religion. But you know, the truth is, secular means accepting no religion in matters of governance, which means a citizen is beyond his religion. A citizen and the government, when he looks after a citizen, he looks at it beyond religion. Unfortunately, as Jaggi rightly said, the appeasement politics of this country that started way back because of the Khilafat movement itself continues, whether it is Congress, whether it is BJP, or whether it is any political party. The problem is the prostitution of the word secular. As soon as you take out the word secular from the constitution, maybe everybody will start thinking as Indians and everybody will start thinking as Bharatvasis.
So he's hit the nail in his own typical firebrand way. Savio has said it as it is. And I think this new point about secularism being the chief tool of appeasement, I think this is a very interesting one, and we see this every day. So, Jaggi sir?
Yeah, see, the point is we implanted a word which are a specific Eurocentric concept, where the church and the temporal rulers were forever in conflicts. Both of them had armies. Both of them were involved in both the taxation and thing. They decided on a separation of powers in their specific context. Okay. Now, in the Islamic context, there is absolutely no separation of power. In fact, the Prophet was the military commander, the political head, and the religious head. So, in them, they believe in combining everything. So, they do not believe in secularism. In the Indian context, we have had a more gray approach to it. We said that, look, an individual can decide which is religious and thing. You don't need the state to tell you that this is separate, that is separate, and all that. You decide for yourself. Our basic concept is acceptance of all ideas. The critical word from English, if you want to use to describe an Indian attitude to diversity, it is pluralism. That is probably a better word than secularism. Secularism is a very Eurocentric word. It is not relevant to India. Even in the US, they don't use the word secular. What they say basically that First Amendment to the Constitution, which says that Congress shall make no law to establish religion. That happened because the various denominations were afraid that suddenly Congress might decide that, say, baptism is a state religion, or somebody will think that it is the Pentecostalism that might become. So they said, let's agree that none of this will become state religion. That is the reason why they put the First Amendment, not because they believe that state should be separate from religion. It so came about in that way, from a background. So even there, it did not come because they believed in the Eurocentric thing, but because the various denominations could not agree which should be the main state religion. Okay. And in England, there is no separation of church and state. The Queen of England is the head of the Church of England. So even there, it is a fictitious separation of church and state. And the Vatican is not just a religious place. It is right there in the Nations as a separate state with ambassadors in several countries. So my point is, the so-called separation, even in the Eurosector, is largely hypocritical. It doesn't exist. Okay, so I don't know why we are so obsessed with that word, and there are an entire community of left liberals or left illiberals rather, who are busy giving certificates saying you are secular, you are not, you are secular, you are not. Time to tell these guys to go and pack up and go home. And I think our word is, we are naturally diverse. We don't need that word, nor do we need anything like that.
Correct. That's really explaining it to the root. Now, let us discuss the symptoms as they are emerging, and the symptoms of this general intolerance in the name of Khilafat and the Khilafat 2.0. If you remember, in the CAA agitation, a lot of walls were painted with Khilafat 2.0. So Khilafat 2.0 is actually a message to the non-believers that, okay, the Mughal Empire is ready to come back. And in fact, the partition, when it did occur, as Jaggi had mentioned, that it was only the difference in methodology. Both the Devbandis and Barelvis ultimately wanted to completely Islamize India. Devbandi said that it is best done if the country remains united. They called it Qawmiyat Muttaida. And the Barelvis, which were the larger sect, went and supported Jinnah. They said, no, we need to follow the Prophet and carve out our new Medina, strengthen ourselves, and then reclaim the Mughal Empire by conquering Delhi all over again. So the objects were the same. Now, that same noise is coming to us all over again. We heard the All India Muslim Personal Law Board, the way it attacked the Honorable Supreme Court. I mean, I haven't seen that kind of audacity even by Prashant Bhushan. He seems to be one of the more audacious guys. So they went all hammer and tong against the Supreme Court, calling it shameful, majoritarian, appeasing, and whatnot. Then today, that Imam Association president, another Maulana, he also said that, okay, the same thing. Muslim Personal Law Board also say the same thing, that, okay, situations change. When we come back, we will break it to her again. And this guy also says, कि हम तो वापस आएंगे तो हम तोड़ेंगे. So people who are proclaiming today in the information age in 21st century that when they get into power, they will break it. And we already have the instance of the Hagia Sophia. My proposition to both of you is that basically all the whitewashing of their crimes against Hindu temples and against other non-believers, such as in the Mysore state by Tipu Sultan, they've actually confessed and acknowledged that they were the ones who done all this. And all the efforts of the Aligarh School of History, Muhammad Habib and his son Irfan Habib, they all lie in tatters.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Jaggi, can you take this, please?
Yeah, I mean, there is no doubt. The problem with Islam has always been this, that they're unable to exist in peace with other communities unless they are in the ruling side. And when they're the ruling side, we know what happens, right? We've seen that in Pakistan and Bangladesh and Afghanistan, and which was the precise reason why we even needed the CAA. The point is, unlike Christianity, which went also through this kind of phase of extreme intolerance with the Inquisition and other things, but somewhere the Reformation, Renaissance, Enlightenment, science in Europe actually moderated it, and they sort of come back to a certain amount of equanimity in terms of how they deal with matters of religion and things. Islam has never had that kind of thing, because 1000 years back they closed the doors to ijtihad. So now you have a situation where a totally unreformed religion, which is which is afraid of modernity in some way, except in killing technologies, is trying to again bamboozle its way through all the areas where it's in. I think the old concept of jihad is not being given up. People keep, to confuse us, they'll say there is lesser jihad and greater jihad. But we have not seen any of these guys practice lesser jihad. Mostly they are on to the greater jihad, or rather, the lesser jihad is the main jihad. So the point is, I think we are back to facing a difficult situation, something like a direct action day that Jinnah ordered in 1946, and CAA was like something like a appetizer, a trailer. I think we have to worry about how these guys are going to react in future once the COVID thing. I think the world has to worry about it. Unfortunately, both the Christian West and the other things have decided to play a very politically correct role. They are actually giving justifications for jihadism. If you see the left and even the church in some ways is in India, at least, it's in league with the same guys. Abroad, of course, they are on different planets. But the point is, uh, they are giving soft justification. Whatever you talk, they say it's Islamophobia. Now, what do you do with that kind of a thing? This is what happened in UK when those Pakistani gangs were grooming teenage English girls. The police didn't act because they were afraid that they're going to be accused of Islamophobia. In every European city, there is a no-go area which is occupied by immigrants, largely of Muslim origin. In Sweden, even the German chancellor said that these are closed doors, which means they create separate communities and ghettos of their own, where the main state has almost no chance except permission through entry only through their permission. So we are talking about separatist enclaves even in countries which do not have more than a small minority there. We've seen that happen. So I don't know how this can be tackled except through strength. I think China is doing it in a very harsh way with the Uyghurs, but that's obviously the wrong way, because they are actually tormenting them and making them go through the Soviet equivalent of the Gulag. But somewhere a tough stand needs to be taken, otherwise these guys are going to run riot.
Well, you pointed out some very relevant stuff. And actually, I would say that the only places where this jihad has been tackled, and of course, there is nothing like what is called lesser jihad and greater jihad. It is not mentioned in the Quran. And the doctrine that is followed by the Hanafi Muslims in India, that is the Fatawa Alamgiri of Aurangzeb, that has laid down a definition of jihad, which is followed by both Deoband and Barelvi. And Deoband Hidayah clearly says that jihad दीनो हक की ओर बुलाने और उससे इनकार करने वाले से जंग करने को कहते हैं. That is, jihad is the name of that action, which is that war which is undertaken when an invitation to Islam is refused. So that is the doctrine that is taught to every cleric who goes up to the status of an imam in a mosque. Every one of them has been schooled in that particular doctrine. So it is absolute nonsense, and it is totally hypocritical to say that there is something called a lesser jihad that is practiced. If that is practiced, then let Deoband and Bareli say that. They don't say that. So that being the point, you also made out a point about jihad. The only way to tackle it is through strength, and the only three places we have seen that happen, and that's been under the Spanish Inquisition. And we've seen that happen under the Soviet Union, how they completely dismantled the Turkestan hotbed of jihad. And,
Chechnya and Dagestan.
Chechnya, Dagestan, or the Central Asia, basically.
Yes, correct.
Turkestan is basically Central Asia. Turkey is only an extension of Turkestan because that was Anatolia. And these guys, the Central Asian guys, they went and occupied Anatolia, which was a Christian and pagan land. And now that is the mainstream Turkey. The Central Asian guys, their Islam and Islamism was completely dismantled by the Soviet Union. Until today, there doesn't seem to be any hope of a revival over there. China is doing it in East Turkestan, which is also a part of Turkestan. The classical Turkestan comprised all these 5 Central Asian nations today, the Balkh area of Afghanistan, and this Eastern Turkestan. This was the old Turkestan, which went into west to occupy Anatolia and came into east to occupy India. So your point is absolutely correct about strength being the answer to this kind of mayhem that is wrought under jihad. What do you say, Savio?
Well, I think the first aspect of it is accepting that we have a problem. Let's look at the situation in Kashmir right now. And we are, in most cases, hearing that everything is normal. I myself have visited Kashmir. This was in September, after the abrogation of Article 370. You know, my personal opinion is that nothing in Kashmir is normal. And nothing in Kashmir will continue to be normal. And this has got nothing to do with the demographic issues of Kashmir. This has got to do with the mindset of majority of the people in Kashmir. Their mindset is a pro-Kashmir and not a pro-India mindset. So when you ask them, what is your view about the situation? They will tell you that we are pro-Kashmir first, then we are pro-India, which primarily means that they think that they are a society and a race unto themselves over and above India. Now, why has this come about? That is the most important aspect, because Kashmir was never a Muslim territory. Kashmir predominantly over the years was a part of Bharat. The point is Islamic radicalization continuously in their education system, in their senior education system, where subjects like Arabic, Islam are compulsory. And those are the tools that are used to then radicalize the young minds. That is what continues in Kashmir even now. Today, with what the government is doing in its policies, in its political maneuvering, some of them are absolutely wrong maneuvers, in my opinion, because you have to be able to bring them out of that sense of belief that they have, which is their mindset that they are over and above anything else to do with India and Bharat. And that is what needs to change. So when you're dealing with Islamic radicalism, please understand that Islamic radicalization is not a grown-up subject. Islamic radicalization is something that it's incepted into the mind at a young age, at an age when they are in kindergarten, moving up to first, to primary, and then to the other subjects that they study. So Islamic radical indoctrination is a serious issue. And it's a serious issue that the world is seeing. Unfortunately, we are so afraid to address it directly and correct it directly. We hide behind the shadows of appeasement, wanting to say that, oh no, there are Muslims who are truly Indians, and there are. But there are a whole lot of them. There are Islamic radicals. And that is a problem that the world is facing, not only India. The only reason they have not been successful in India is because you have a majority of people that belong to the Hindu religion, and they are difficult to defeat. They've been trying it for years. But somehow, and by the grace of Ram, it survives. And Hinduism will continue to survive. Sanatan Dharma will continue to survive. But Islamic radicalism needs to be curtailed. Islamic radicalism needs to be culled if it has to. And it can only be done by strength, and I agree with Jaggi on that. It has to be done by force. It has to be done by strength and strategically. What happened at the CAA riots, and I'm repeating myself as I said before, it was not a movement of anti-CAA. It was a movement of anti-India. And that movement was backed by organizations based in the US, the Islamic organizations. Organizations like Stand with Kashmir, Islamic Circle of North America. These are the organizations that have been backing it. Are you even aware? Is India even aware that they put out billboards in New Jersey and Detroit talking about the atrocities of India against Kashmir? Kashmir is a part of India. The Kashmiris are a part of India. This mindset is the problem, and this mindset, strangely, lies with the expatriate population of Muslims around the world. It's not necessarily with the Arabs. The Arabs put in the inception, and then you have the Pakistani Muslims, the Bangladeshi Muslims, the Afghani Muslims, and every other Muslim that is not an Arab, thinking that their job is to do jihad. Do you see a very prominent Muslim from the Arab world who's actually doing jihad? No. The ones in ISIS also right now are some of the boys from Kerala. So the point is, it's brainwashing at the highest level, and that's what needs to be culled. So strength, yes. Aggression, yes. Assertiveness, yes. Islamic radicalization must be crushed in India and across the world. There is no other way to deal with it.
Glad you brought Kashmir into this because Article 370 is also part of our discussion. And the unrest in Kashmir is actually part of the same template, according to me. And I like to trace it right from the time of the first Exodus. And the first Exodus also happened because the compassionate DNA of our people, of one of the kings, they gave shelter to somebody who ultimately went on to usurp the throne. And once he had usurped the throne, once Islam had come into it, the Shamiri dynasty, Shamir was given shelter by Suhadev of the Lohar dynasty. Once he came into the picture, Islam never left that land. And they continued to drive the natives, the original, the Mool Nivasis, out of Kashmir. And all these left liberals who would talk about Mool Nivasi, who would try to make Mool Nivasi out of the long time residents of all past India, they never talk about the Mool Nivasis of Kashmir. So, first Exodus, then second at the time of another Sufi saint. The first one was also triggered off by a Sufi saint, Shah Hamdan's son. Then second also another Sufi saint, Shamsuddin Shah Akhi. Then third one, Aurangzeb, another great Sufi. Then fourth one, Durranis of Afghanistan. Those same guys who were invited by Shah Waliullah of during the Battle of Panipat. Shah Waliullah somehow is still a great man for all the Hanafi Sunnis, while Mir Jafar is a traitor. And I say that Mir Jafar was a patriot because he sided with the local population, with the Hindus, to oust an oppressor, a bigot, named Sirajuddaula. But Shah Waliullah and Tipu Sultan, who invited the caliphs and the shahs of Afghanistan, they are treated by these Hanafi Muslims as some kind of saviors. And Aurangzeb, of course, the Wali. The Wali is next only to the to Allah and the Prophet. So this is the kind of discourse that has gone on in Kashmir. We tended to ignore it, and of course they had the full dose of Nehruism there. And my proposition once again to you, Jaggi sir, is that two-nation theory was confirmed by Jawaharlal Nehru, even though Congress had opposed it during pre-partition days, but the two-nation theory was confirmed by Jawaharlal Nehru by way of Article 370.
Absolutely. And the fact that, they kept saying it is temporary and never doing anything about it. I mean, they were happy to send Sheikh Abdullah to prison for years, not once, but twice or thrice. But they kept Article 370 thinking that that's the way to keep people. The fact is, appeasement never is going to end. You can only say, listen, thus far, no further. And that's what Article 370 is, abolition or evisceration, rather. It's not entirely literally abolished, but it's been reduced in status in terms of this thing. I think is the first step. But I do not know, I have not read a book on what you think is the future. But I think there is still an unfinished work there in Kashmir. I think it should probably have been split into three parts, where Jammu has its own chief minister, Kashmir is separate, and that's the area where the militancy exists and which needs to be contained. There is no reason to infect Jammu with the Kashmir virus. So you need to have a good 6 yards of separation, like we treat corona. And Ladakh, of course, has also been insulated. And Kashmir, then you can deal with it as a limited problem. You have to, the next generation of Kashmiris has to be taught that, look, you're a part of India, you are welcome here, but Islamism cannot have a place. You're free to practice your religion, but Islamism is your, what do you call, invite for extinction. So you please deal with it, start from the young classes and do that. So Kashmir needs to be isolated and re-educated. Jammu needs to be brought into the mainstream more thing because it still has a secular majority and not a Islamist trend. And Ladakh, of course, can be retained as a Indian territory. So we should have had 3 states, and demographically we should have shifted Jammu further into more Indians should have been allowed to do that. And once we had done that, maybe you would have contained the problem a little faster. But as of now, we always take 1 step forward and 2 steps back, or rather 2 steps forward and 1 step back, whatever you want to say. But I think it's unfinished business. But I'm glad that the Nehruvian era of the two-nation theory has formally been declared over. And I hope it continues.
All right. That is the situation there. And I was actually having a conversation today with the 2 Kashmiri Pandit stalwarts. You know both of them, Sushil Pandit and Lalit Ambardar.
Yeah.
While they welcomed the nullification of Article 370, but they were very vociferous about the way it was being implemented. And what comes out from that discourse is that the appeasement virus that still lurks, that still hangs, that is still at work in Kashmir. And as you mentioned in my book, I have also advocated that Jammu be separated.
Okay, I haven't come to that part, so I
have
just started.
Because that comes in the postscript right at the end.
Yeah. Okay.
You will take a while reaching there. And because the Medina project of Pakistan, as was envisioned by the Barelvis at the time of the partition, and of course, which is espoused by the military establishment, which is the real establishment in Pakistan, because its motto, official motto, says taqwa, iman, and jihad fi sabilillah. So jihad fi sabilillah, jihad in the way of Allah, is the violent jihad. So it's a jihadi army, it's a jihadi lashkar.
That's right.
And they have to conquer Delhi to re-establish the Mughal Empire. That is actually the subtext of everything that Pakistan does, and what most of our clerical class among the Muslims does. And Kashmir was the gateway, then Jammu was next. And if this 370 had not been abandoned, and somebody like Mahbooba Mufti had continued, she had already set into motion the process of complete Islamization of Jammu. We know that. Rohingyas are only a part of that grand scheme. So Savio, how do you think we can get rid of this appeasement, at least from Kashmir? Because Kashmir is, and Kashmiris have suffered. The radicalization will remain. And you did mention, I think, Jaggi mentioned, you also mentioned that
The
it's very hard.
first step, Sanjay, the first step is education. I think we need to bring the CBSE, the ICSE, the subjects that are studied by people across India into Jammu and Kashmir, right from the lower classes, number one. We need to keep a watch on the madrasa education over there. Track it, trace it, and find out where the radicalism stems from. Now, there are two large organizations working in Kashmir at this point of time. One we have banned, which is Jamaat-e-Islamiyah. The other one, the more dangerous one, is Ahle Hadith. And Ahle Hadith has got some of the most brilliant minds as far as education is concerned. Now, the education, when they get in main colleges, are education just like normal students would take in any part of the world and any part of India. It is the education that they have at a madrasa level that really is where the seeds are sown. So we have to figure out a strategy to deal with the madrasas that impart this education. If you're able to do that, then when he grows up into going into college or doing his PhD or MBA, he is not somebody who's become Islamic radical in his mind. He's a more saner person. Because if you actually go and map out all the terrorists that have been caught or killed, most of them were educated people. So where is that education coming from? To bring about a radical strain, to bring out a terrorist strain in you, that is coming from a madrasa level education. And if we don't deal with that, forget Kashmir, you will see this happening across India. I am not being a doomsayer advocate at all. I am telling you just what trends are being seen and mapped by individuals like me who make it a point to study these kind of trends. The trend is very clear. It is at a madrasa level. And if we don't deal with it, we're going to have trouble worse than the anti-CAA riots in the days to come. It is only COVID that has reduced the influx of what they plan to do. I'm in November, come November, October or November, as per our information, which we have relayed to the authorities in the government, there is going to be protests happening across India on similar lines to anti-CAA protests. They will find a reason to do that. They have already been starting collecting funds in the US for it. It will happen at some point of time. The blessing is COVID at this point of time, but they will reach a point where they will say it doesn't matter. So how do you stop it? You stop it with education. You stop it with tracing madrasa level education and finding out how to deal with it. You see, people take that route because of what they have are fed in their mind. So I keep coming back. It's not a political issue. It is a mindset issue. And mindset can be only curtailed and changed through education. And the right kind of education at the lowest level, not the highest level. Because by that time, they are already indoctrinated in the rubbish filled in their head. And Islamic radicalization in plain, simple words, is rubbish. It completely makes a person so deviant to any humanity that he has that he picks up a gun or puts on a bomb on himself and blows up innocent people just to prove a point that his religion is supreme. And that is the most stupidest and the lamest act of any humanitarian person. And that is why I say Islamic radicalization makes a person in his head completely rubbish and drained out of humanity. That's the problem with it. So education is the way to solve it. Number two, appeasement. I think this government needs to understand that nobody of the previous lot of rulers in Kashmir, when I mean rulers, I'm talking about political rulers. They are the reason why Kashmir is in such a bad situation. They should have all been in jail. Forget detained. They should have all been in jail. They should have continued to stay in jail. Don't you find it coincidental? The clashes happening now, the deaths happening now, the attacks on the sarpanches. Who are the political leaders who have come out and map how many incidents have happened past they have been released from detention? And you will realize exactly what I'm saying. People like Farooq Abdullah, Omar Abdullah, and the rest of the lot are responsible for the mindset in Kashmir. So if BJP wants to deal with it politically, you might deal with it politically for a very short while, but you're going to have a problem resurfacing not only in Kashmir, you're going to have it in Kerala, you're going to have it in Tamil Nadu, you're going to have it in parts of Hyderabad, you're going to have it in parts of Maharashtra as well, and Delhi. And you're going to face a problem if the government doesn't realize where to curtail it.
Well, Dr. Ambedkar said two things, and which I've quoted extensively in my book and again. The two things that he said. One was that the Muslim politics in India is the gangsters' method of politics. And the second thing that he said was for Indian National Congress, and that he said that the Congress doesn't understand the difference between appeasement and settlement. And I don't think it has understood that difference even now. But the only danger is that the present ruling party shouldn't catch the bug. I'll also request my viewers, please keep shooting your questions. We are nearing the end of the talk. And after that, we will take up all your questions. You may like to address it to one of them. If you do that, that will facilitate my job as a moderator. If you don't, then I will have to pick one of them.
Sanjay, I just want to make one point. We talk about Kashmir, we talk about Kerala, we talk about the other states. We have a glaring example in a state called West Bengal. A glaring example. You need to look at the Islamic radicalization happening over there. You have a government that is pro-Islamic radicalization. They are the ones actually taking it forward. So we have to address this issue as a center in a more firm manner. It cannot be, half-baked. It's never going to work. The US tried it, and they have not been very successful. The only countries, as we spoke about, 3 nations that were successful in doing it, 3 regions. Right now is China doing it. And though I'm not a fan of China, I think they're doing it in a very harsh way. But human rights don't approach them. They don't say anything to them. But if we were to even respond to what the Muslim Personal Law Board said, as far as the Ayodhya Ram Mandir was concerned, and the judgment, we would be considered to be victimizing them. They should be held in contempt of court. But they cry victim all the time. They cry victim all the time, and the media gives them that. We need to break that nexus. The government needs to break it. So when a Rana Ayub, when people come out and make statements against India that are not in favor of the entire diversity of India, they need to be picked up and thrown in jail. There's no other way to deal with it.
I agree with you wholeheartedly on that point. And that, of course, is the standard template. Again, the same thing that I've mentioned again. Again, I bring my book into this, is that H.V. Seshadri, he laid down the template. He said that there are 2 behavior patterns, and one behavior is the Muslim politics and the other is the national politics. And both of them collaborated unwittingly to take India to partition. And what is the Muslim behavior pattern? They said the Muslim behavior pattern is start with acrimony, then accusations. After that, you make some claims, which are usually absurd claims. Then, of course, absurd claims cannot be met. Then you go to make demands based on those claims. Then, after those demands, you do some deceptive kind of thing, deceptions. Then denunciations, and finally street rats. And street rats are a wonderful thing. In street rats, either more Muslims get killed or more Hindus get killed. So if more Hindus or non-Muslims get killed, then you go around with a swagger and tell your folks, hey, look, this is the grace of Allah that we are winners. And if you don't, if you more Muslims get killed in the riots, then you play victim. So win-win situation. And what does the national politics do to this to counter this? He says that it is characterized by assent. Sorry, first is acquiescence. See, acquiescence, then assent, then cajolery, then cowardice, then self-reproach, and finally surrender. And this two behavior pattern. This is H.V. Seshadri, actually. He wrote a beautiful book on separatism. So I pose it to both of you, gentlemen. Is there any change? This has been going on since the time of Khilafat, and today we see the kind of radicalization and radicalism that is going on. But is there any change in this two behavior pattern? Jaggi sir, first.
No, see, I think we need to separate two things. I think in any community, the number of people who are willing to be radical and act on that radicalism may be small, maybe 1%, 2%, even 3%. But the problem is the remaining 97% who think they don't have to do anything, but they effectively allow the 3% to control the narrative. Right? This is what is happening in Islam. I mean, while it is true to say that not every Muslim thinks like that, but the fact is, what Islam does, it first terrorizes its own people. So then collectively, that then takes over. And before you know, you have, I mean, Islam is actually most dangerous for Muslims themselves. Because if you see any Islamic country, look at Pakistan, they're busy destroying Shia mosques and Ahmadiyyas and Baha'is and those kind of people. So what is the so-called Islamic Brotherhood? They're busy a fratricidal thing in the name of same God, right? So it is ridiculous. So I have a feeling that the radical fringe controls the middle and the center because the others they're too petrified to object, and it's very difficult for an average Muslim to even oppose this. So I do not know whether there is an answer except through very extraordinary display of strength on the thing. That is the only thing that keeps a bully back in his place, because cowardice is no answer, appeasement is no answer. And I hope India has learned this lesson. I mean, this is the same with China. I mean, the minute you say we will have talks, we will discuss how you will go back from the border and things, these guys think you have already lost it. So they will talk nicely and say, okay, what? They are heads I win, tails you lose kind of guys. You know, give and take means you give, I take. It doesn't mean both give and take. So this is the same with Islam. So this is what is happening. There is no change, and they've not had their Reformation and Renaissance and Enlightenment. I don't know when that will happen. Till that happens, that Islam continues to be a threat not only to India but the whole world. I think I don't know how this process of internal argumentation and rethink will happen, but somewhere they have to begin because they're a large community. They're not some small community like the Parsis, where it doesn't matter even if you don't change. But they're too large. They're the world's second largest thing, and in a couple of decades they will be larger than Christianity, right? So they're going to be the world's biggest religion in probably by 2040 or 2050. And if they have not had an argument with themselves on what is reasonable conduct in a multi-dimensional society, then it's this thing. I think the only thing we can do is protect ourselves, take aggressive action to prevent this nonsense from spreading. That's the only way to go.
Savio.
Islamic radicalization is a world problem. It's a global problem, and nations and leaders like Prime Minister Modi must work with other leaders to deal with it. We're not dealing with terrorism. Terrorism is the outcome of the problem. It is not the root of the problem. You have to deal with the root. You have most of the world leaders talking about dealing with terrorism. We need to deal with the root of the problem. And that root of that problem is Islamic radicalization and its education across the world. If we figure out a way to deal with this globally, then you would have been able to deal with the problem. But it is not an easy task to do, even if we came about doing it in India. So the point is, how do you make them inclusive? Because as Jaggi rightly said, in certain countries where there are majority of Muslim population, the victims are actually the Muslims themselves because of this desire to be radical in your approach. So there's really nothing moving, and they end up being dictators in those areas, in those Muslim countries. So the point is, how do you go about bringing them to believe that they can move forward in a nation without a religion? And that is where India plays a very, very important role. Because if India, being as secular as it should really be, not in the definition that has been brainwashed us in, then religion must be kept separate, and it must be more community centric within your own community, and governance has to be on the basis of you being a citizen, and a citizen that has given his best to the country. So there are people from the Muslim faith who are true Indians, who have given a lot for the country, and there are a certain amount of the radicals that do exist. And you know why the radicals continue to exist? It's because the Muslims who are actually good Muslims do not open the mouth against the bad Muslims. And that is what we need to change. We have to inspire the real right thinking Muslims to stand up for the nation over and above the religion. That's not an easy task, but that's the only way we're going to achieve something, is my view on it.
Actually, some of the problems in Islam and Christianity are common, but Christianity is at the luck of Reformation and Renaissance. So a whole lot of them have started thinking rationally, and it's kind of an open season kind of a thing in Christianity. Most of it, in fact, the majority of the Christians now, they like to think rationally, and that is why there is a lot of movement away from the church also. But in Islam, there is a very curious phenomenon. I have mentioned it extensively. Again, the curious phenomenon is called in three of the four major Sunni sects. They've got four major Sunni sects. That is the Shafi'i, the Maliki, the Hanafi, and the Hanbali. So here we have the Hanafi Islam, which was basically what was there in Turkestan. So we've got the Turkestan variant here. So they have something called, the theologically, it's called taqleed. And as in Abrahamic religions, that threat of damnation and the threat of eternal hell, it plays very heavy on the psychology of an individual, because you don't have a return ticket, you don't have another chance, you just have one chance, and that one chance you don't want to annoy Allah, or you don't want to annoy God. But here you have the curious phenomenon of what is called taqleed. Taqleed means the reason or aql is prohibited for the general public. It is supposed to be exercised only by the high clerics, not even the lower clerics. It's only those muftis and what is called musahids and mustahifs, all kind of names, the big ones. The big clerics only, there would be about handful of them, say about 100, 200. They are the only people who are supposed to exercise the power of reason, and they are supposed to guide all the people, and all the people are supposed to take their guidance, and that is what the source of these fatwas are. Because a guy doesn't know whether he should be lying on his left side while sleeping or on the right side. So he is not supposed to use his reason. So he asks for a fatwa from somebody who is authorized, from a mufti. A mufti is one who issues fatwa. And that is the source of all these troubles. So my very simple prescription, mostly it has been to the government, that control these people. Control these people who issue fatwas. Reduce your target to a few hundred or a few thousand. Don't go around controlling everybody, because it is not possible. It is not possible. But because of taqleed, if all these people, you are able to control them, you get them to issue the right kind of fatwa, all of them together, then you have solved the problem. But governments have got to have guts to do it.
Yeah.
Governments I have seen that it is easier for the government to tackle a terrorist than, as Savio said, to tackle the root of terror. So
Correct.
that is the difficulty.
Sanjay, when I started writing on Islamic radicalism, let me tell you this. I'm banned from traveling to Turkey.
Okay,
I cannot travel to Turkey. I've
you're
been
not
told
missing
not
much.
to travel.
Oh, even they have noted what you have written.
Yep. I cannot travel to Saudi Arabia. When I tried to travel to Malaysia on a business visit, I was not getting the visa to go there. And they were giving me all sorts of lame reason when my own team member could travel on some issue, right? So I know I have been watched primarily because, you see, Islamic radicalism is a very close community. They take various different names. The roots are the same. You see what is happening in America right now. All of them are controlling the way the US government needs to move as far as their victimization is concerned. They're positioning themselves as such victims of human rights violations, and they're positioning Kashmir as a problem of indigenous people of Islam that are actually being traumatized by the majority of Hindus in India. That is the game plan. That is why the Lashkar-e-Toiba has a new name in Kashmir. It's the Resistance Front, the Englandized version of their jihadi mentality, the Resistance Front. Stand with Kashmir. What does that mean? We are making this issue global. We are giving it a fight of freedom. That is the nonsense, because Jihad, Jamaat Islamia, Al Hadith, these names are not going down well in the global market. That is why they started to come up with the Resistance Front. Stand with Kashmir, Islamic Circle of North America, HHRD, which is Helping Hands. That is really the problem. We are not even anticipating what the problem is. And if India takes an appeasement role, we are going to have trouble in the months to come. We have to deal with it with iron fist.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, what we'll do is that we'll start taking questions. Viewers, this is your last chance to start shooting questions. We got only 3 or 4 questions till now, which is good for us, but not very good for the viewers. And also, I would request you that please like, share, and subscribe this video, and of course, contribute to us if you feel that we are doing a good job. So we take the questions. Questions will flash on the screen. So the first question is Yogesh Suman. The secular comes from secular clergy, Christian, in legal matters. How does it relate to India? Savio?
Well, like I said before in our discussion, secular is the most prostituted word used in India. Its meaning has got no relevance to what the actual meaning of the word is. Secularism or secular does not mean the acceptance of all religion in matters of governance. Secular or secularism means the acceptance of no religion in matters of governance. That's the clinical definition. You can pick up any dictionary and look at it, which means that a government must look at an individual irrespective of his religion because he's a citizen of that nation. And that is the real definition of secularism. The idea of a secularism that came in by the Christian clergy was also a very warped idea of secularism, and it was not the clinical definition of secularism. Secularism means completely keeping religion away, and that is what Sanatan Dharma's ideology, philosophy, as far as kings and warriors were concerned, was about. That you treat every citizen the way it is. That's why I said at the start of our discussion, we are progressing to Ram Rajya, and that will be the change not only in India, but across the world.
Right. So the next question coming up. This is again the same person. Uh, don't we? Why don't we teach Quran to everyone? A problem would finish faster. What's your view? Actually, I agree with this one. I tell people that if you want to know your adversary, and Islam is acting as an adversary, then you have to know his views. So you must study. I tell a lot of people that unless you study Urdu, what on earth you have a chance of understanding what Shahid Siddiqui writes in Nayi Dunya? You only
Correct.
see his good face on the television. But I go and read his Nayi Dunya and then bring his actual face to the public. So, anyway, I've given my views, but yes, Jaggi, what do you
Yeah,
say?
actually, it's very simple. I think we need to know what the Quran prescribes for as key actions. Some of it may certainly be good, but most of it, especially when it comes to treatment of people who are not Muslims, need to be particularly publicized. In fact, if you publicize it, you will be accused of Islamophobia. That's the problem. So I think you should teach it, and because the point is, people say, no, that is misinterpretation. You are an Islamophobe. That's why you're interpreting it like that. So I think these guys know how to run with the hare and hunt with the hounds. So when necessary, they'll always play victim no matter what. So even when you explain what the Quran says, either they should say, no, we don't agree with this. And that was said 1400 years ago. It's not relevant today. That they can't say. They don't seem to want to say, because they feel that if the minute they start rejecting some words of the Quran, then they feel that the whole faith will collapse. What kind of faith is it that has to depend on every word of the thing? If I had to say that every single word in the Samveda or Upanishad I have to agree with, then there is a problem. I know that they contain a lot of wisdom. I know they contain all things like that, but I don't have to agree with every single word, right? That's the basis of freedom and democracy. So, but somewhere Islamists have got their people into a bind where I think saying that we disagree with this particular aspect or that particular aspect is now something no Muslim is willing to say. The minute a Muslim is willing to say that, he has to be like Ibn Wara or somebody else who cannot, or Tariq Fateh, who actually will be treated, and if they ever land up anywhere in the Middle East, they'll be slaughtered. This is the problem.
Actually, I'll just supplement this. The issue in Islam is, as I said, especially Hanafi Islam in India, is that factor of taqleed which people do not adequately understand. I would urge both of you, scholars, also to try and understand that concept. And
Okay.
because of that, a Muslim, an ordinary Muslim, is not even supposed to read Quran independently. He is only supposed to read it through the tafsir or the commentaries. And the two commentaries that are in India are from Deoband, the Hidayah, and the Fatawa Razviya of Ala Hazrat uh, Ahmad Raza Barelvi, the founder of the Barelvi sect. And you look at them, Arun Shori has done a fine job of quoting the Nafrat ke ahkamat, ordinances of hatred, commandments of hatred, which are contained in Fatawa Razviya. So these are the things that people are supposed to read and not supposed to exercise their mind because a great mufti or a great mujaddid has said this. So they're not supposed to do that. So, because we are under no compulsion to only follow them. We can read everything and we can make our own interpretations and make it public. So that is my humble view in this. In the next question, uh, Harry Kesu. Oh, what does it say? Can you enlarge it, please? Slightly. Not let. Okay. Why, Madrasa? Even the people in DAV are radicalized. Saying that the DAV school people are
Actually,
also
I don't know much about that, so I wouldn't comment on that. Maybe it's something that he should hear in a larger.
well, I'll make a comment on this because I know DAV. Anybody who can see the people in DAV are radicalized, only a radical can say this. So, next question, please. Yes, Kapil Garg is asking this changing lieutenant governor so soon. A good idea by government in JK. Savio, your take?
I don't think they changed the lieutenant governor in JK. I think the lieutenant governor resigned on his own based on certain discussions that happened with the center. I'm not privy to that discussion, so I don't have a full-blown comment on it, but I only go by facts of a particular situation. And the facts of the situation was that the Lieutenant Governor Murmu himself had resigned, and there were a discussion between the center and him. Why he resigned and what were the context of that resignation will be known in the coming days. But as of now, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, he's joining as the CAG.
Yeah. So probably he saw a better prospect there.
Yeah, that's a better prospect. So anybody who was given the job of a CAG would gladly take it. So that could be one explanation. Next question, please. Oh, it's an interesting name. The Voice of Homeopathy. This is in Hindi. So
Yeah.
I will read it on Hindi and I'll request you to answer it in Hindi. क्या जनसंख्या नियंत्रण बिल बैकफायर कर सकता है? जनसंख्या जिहाद को कैसे रोका जाएगा? 4 बीवी बच्चे 45 सबके हाथ में है AK-47.
ये जो प्रश्न है संजय जी, it's a very interesting question because this person who's ever asked this question has hit the nail on the head. The problem is that the strategy is to grow in numbers. It's not a phenomenon only in India. It's a phenomenon they've been using all over the world. It is only when you grow in numbers that you can control the outcome of any situation. So one of the strategies used by Islamic radicals is to increase the number of children that you have. Let's be open about it. You know me, Sanjay, I don't know any other way of talking. And
no,
that's the fact.
I know. And everyone loves you for that.
And it's the strategy that they've been using all over the world. So if you look at it in Canada, I have my family in Canada. If you look at it in Germany, if you look at it in UK, if you look at every other country, this is a strategy that they have adopted. And they've added on to it. So increasing the numbers within their own community is one aspect of it. Love jihad is the other aspect of it. Where they take people from your community, try to indoctrinate them, or brainwash them, or harass them into believing what you're saying and grow more population in order to take their community forward. So the Islamic radicalism strategies are very clear. These are not strategies that were set now. These were strategies that were planned a couple of decades ago. It's a long drawn out plan for global dominion. The more we understand it, the better we will be able to deal with it. And one of the best ways to deal with it is a 2-child policy for the country, is my opinion on this.
Right. Jaggi sir, anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, see, the religion grows through strategies. One is demographic thing, other is periodic levels of intimidation. So between the two things, these are the two pillars which allows you to rise to global domination, because you use intimidation so that all your enemies suddenly pull back, try to be politically correct, try to get into the Stockholm syndrome, the Dhimmi syndrome. So you stop voicing what is the correct opinion. You start saying, oh, maybe I got this wrong, maybe I wronged this guy, maybe I did something wrong. You start self-doubt. So the intimidation helps do that. Then demographically, you quietly keep growing. So this has been the strategy for a long time. You've seen this in this subcontinent. You've seen that in Kashmir, where the Rohingyas have been shifted and all kinds of things have been planned. It's happening in Kerala. Kerala, I think, will become a Hindu minority state over the next 2 censuses. Assam is heading in that direction. It's already 34% Muslim, and it only needs. See, in the last census, it grew by 3%. It's a very, very huge number. It could be a mix of both higher birth rates and immigration, illegal immigration. So I think the issue is certainly very worrisome, and Western UP again is becoming that. So if UP is ever split, you are going to have yet another Islamic state towards the west of UP. So you're going to have a problem there. So I think demography is something that we need to note, and we need to take steps to control it. So one of the ways would be to disincentivize large families. We should do it for all people. Where in the case of all other communities, whether it's Christians or Hindus or Sikhs or Jains, there we have already mostly most states have reached below 2.1, which is the net replacement rate. I mean, the total fertility rate has fallen below 2.1, which is the replacement rate. Except in UP, Bihar, and one or two states like Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, most other states have reached. They've fallen below replacement rate. But in these 5 states, and a large part of the demography is also from this community. So I think we need to have steps to control them. Incentivize very large families.
Right. Next question, please. I agree with Rodriguez. Madrasas need to be closely monitored for radical ideas. Either that or shut madrasa down altogether. This is more of a suggestion, so we can take it or leave it. I think we'll take the suggestion. I have everybody's consensus for this. Now we come to the last question of the day. How do we make out political leaders are giving incentive or growing courage to be? Sorry, I don't understand the question. How do we make?
What he's saying is that why can't they say things as they are? Why are they too much steeped in political correctness? That's what he's saying.
Right. And as I announced the last question, one more question is coming. Anyway, please take this one.
So basically, I mean, see, if you see most of our leaders before independence, they were far more politically incorrect. Today, if an Ambedkar had written his tract on Pakistan today, he would be blamed as an Islamophobe and told him and everybody would have told him to shut up. Right? Luckily, he wrote it before independence. But after independence, all this political correctness has come into being. So nobody is able to speak the truth. Even a Gandhi could say, the average Muslim is a bully and the Hindu is a coward, right? Now, that would be seen as a horrendous statement to make today. But the fact is, he could make it because he said it the way he saw it. Whether it was right or wrong is a different issue. But he said what he wanted to say, right? And I mean, there are, even Tagore said, even a lot of them said that about Islamic radicalism, even at that point, they had made the same point. And even Tagore said, looks like this is the case, and Ambedkar quotes him in his thing on Pakistan, Tagore and others. So the point is, political correctness, to the extent it does not descend into abuse, is a bad thing. Political incorrectness is necessary in order for us to confront the truth. Otherwise, we are going to, in the name of saying that we are going to be politically correct, we will never grapple with the truth, arrive at the right solutions, the right strategies to deal with the issues as they crop up.
Quite right.
Call a spade a spade. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Exactly as you do. We are going to run your recorded piece on why Hindus need to become missionaries. That will be aired tomorrow at 5:15. So that's the Jaggi being politically incorrect. The next question, we've suddenly got a flood of questions now. So next question, I'm putting it out. Lalit Sharma, notice, which is the next question? Yeah, just coming up. Yeah. Will Tushar Sachdeva, will two-child policy help? They live in colonies where no one is allowed to enter. Even police is afraid. You have seen that in coronavirus time. Savio.
Well, we're talking about an operational issue when you're talking about police not being able to enter a particular colony. Operational issues are not policy issues. Policy issue is a policy decision taken, and you ensure that you enforce that policy. It's based on that, then the operations come into existence. There are many areas, as far as India is concerned, where it's very difficult to deal with this community, the Islamic radical community. And we have to learn to deal with it very firmly. So let's do the policy first. Let's try and keep everybody and the policy in check, and then work on different measures to actually deal with each case on a case-to-case basis, rather than having a blanket decision on how you need to deal with people who don't allow you into their colonies. So the policy is different, the situation is different.
Yeah. Next question, Lalit Sharma. Noticed a lot of Islamic schools in US and kids in the 21st century, in the most modern society, are studying there. What's your view on this? Jaggi sir?
See, the thing is, there is nothing wrong in studying a religion, provided there is openness and even critics can study it and things like that. But if this idea is to indoctrinate, then it's obviously a bad idea. No, I mean, just like we would like people to read the Gita and understand that, right? But if you are going to say, use that to indoctrinate and say that, look, we are going to create a theocratic state in India based on this holy book or that holy book, then there is a problem. But unfortunately, that's not the case when it comes to all these kind of Islamic schools. And same thing like the Chinese Confucius school. They try to indoctrinate you in so that it helps them. So this is the way it works. Their mind works. So it's all about indoctrination and not really study. So they're not schools, but they are actually what you call conditioning agents. That is, they try psychologically, they try to condition you to think in a certain way. It is not about schooling you in how to think. It is about what you
Right.
should take as your thought.
Right. Absolutely right here. Next question, please. Incentivizing two-child will work as a policy? Anand Vikram asking.
Yes, I
Savio?
believe so, it will work. I'm of the firm belief that the only way you can control the growth of Islamic radicalism, one of the main ways, which I'd mentioned before, was education. And the other step is a two-child policy, which will help reduce the number of Islamic radicals that come out, are churned out. So yes, I certainly believe that the two-child policy will work.
Next one. Abhishek Chada is asking, how can we raise awareness and development among non-Sunni, non-Salafi oriented sects to combat extremism?
Well, I think if we think some groups are less radical, then obviously we can take them as partial allies. But I think the whole of Islamic society needs to have a very, what I would call a secular orientation. You need to start from nursery onwards and make sure that by the time they reach secondary school, they're all right-thinking citizens rather than narrow-minded bigots. That's what we need to do, and it applies to all segments and not, as you said, even Sufis we think were some kind of God's gift to India, but didn't turn out to be so. So the minute you have that this basic idea of Islam going through, you are going to become radicalized at some point or the other. So the best thing is to train them, catch them very young.
Okay.
Sanjay, let me give you a little insight into the Saudi ruler, the young Saudi ruler right now, Mohammed bin Salman. and I know some members in the family pretty well because of my connects in the Middle East, and you see, he's come about a thought which is very interesting. I mean, I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong. It's just very interesting to look at what he's doing. He's trying to liberalize Saudi Arabia, and he's using women as the liberalization front in Saudi Arabia. Women could not drive in Saudi Arabia before. It was Mohammed bin Salman who allowed for that to happen. So when I speak to my friends who I've known for a very long time, and some of them are members in the large royal family that are there, the women are ecstatic, and they believe that finally that there is a liberalization that's happening to Saudi Arabian thought of Islam, and maybe that's when the change will happen. So I think also from an India context, the decisions of the government, like the decision on triple talaq and the steps that were taken on that, the inclusiveness of Muslim women into much more activity as far as governance is concerned, give them more opportunities to take a leading role, could be another measure that the government of India can look at in breaking down radicalization. Because at the end of the day, every mother, every woman wants to see that her child or her husband is safe and that community is safe. So I think what Mohammed bin Salman is doing, and knowing that he's a good friend with our Prime Minister as well, I think those are strategies that must be looked at collectively.
Right.
If I may just interject,
Yes, please.
I broadly agree with Savio, but however, I must point out that they seem to be also easy to manipulate within in the context of Islam. Whole of Shaheen Bagh, you had old women sitting there and creating a ruckus,
Of
right?
course.
I do not know why they became so easy to manipulate at the hands of a patriarchal order. So my point is like they need to be
I'll
educated
tell
and
you.
all.
I'll tell you why.
Ah, yeah,
Jaggi,
yeah,
let me also explain this to you. I mean, I
yeah,
know it's going a little over time,
yeah.
but one of the biggest problems that the Indian Armed Forces faces in Kashmir, which when we went there, we interacted a few of the armed forces over there, is that the borders do not have women jawans. You understand?
Mm,
So a
yeah.
lot of drugs, a lot of illegal arms are actually brought in by the women
Hmm. Okay.
because they don't get checked. There
Yeah.
are no women jawans at the border, right? Only in 2021 will be the first set of women jawans that will probably pass out. And then you probably have jawans at that level. So for
Yeah.
many years, what they did was they were the overground workers, OGWs as you call them, right? But again, this is a small fraction of the women's society. A larger section of them,
Yeah.
because of the intrinsic nature of a woman,
Yeah.
can be used for good and can be used for bad. What you saw in Shaheen Bag was the usage for bad. What we can do is use them for good. And that is when you empower the women in the Muslim community or in any community to become your leaders. Can you pull out any Muslim leader in India, women Muslim leader, that has been powerful enough to be the face? I can't think of anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
No,
I completely agree with you.
it's not possible. I take you back to the bad old taqleed.
If you understand taklif, you'll know why we have taklif.
Yes. Next question, please. I think this is the last question now. Hmm. Two-child policy will be applied to government job or private job. Well, I think still not worked out, but Savi, you may answer it.
Um, I think they would be predominantly for government jobs, number one, because private jobs are decisions that are taken by private entrepreneurs. So the nature of whether he has a child, one child or many child, is dependent on whether he's able to deliver as far as his work is concerned, and that's how a private investor or a private CEO thinks. As far as the government is concerned, I think it's very important for them to understand that a two-child policy is something that is necessary across the field, not only with regards to jobs. I think it
Yeah.
must be as far as benefits are concerned. I think it must be as far as healthcare schemes are concerned. I think it must be as far as education needs are concerned. When you need to understand the holistic problem, then the solutions are going to be hard, but they need to be taken. And that's the reason why I think at this point of time, a two-child policy is very necessary.
that brings us to the end of this show today. And we have had a very, very open and forthright discussion. I think at least we are not appeasing anybody. If anybody listens to those discussions, they will not accuse us. So thank you,
Thank you.
Jaggi sir, and thank you, Savio.
Thank you.
It's a
You.
wonderful interaction, a wonderfully open discussion, and we'll keep having more of this in future. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Namaskar.